husband and wife dynamite duo. So Stephanie is an expert, which is a beautiful thing, in helping brilliant women date up. And I love Stephanie because I've interviewed her before, and she does have a brilliant mind, and so she works with brilliant women. And David is a coach, a Reiki master teacher, and a Psych K facilitator. And I know I want to dig into what exactly that is here in a little bit. So welcome both of you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Yeah, excited.
So we're talking about how to make boundaries obsolete this week. And so we hear a lot about boundaries. You've got to have boundaries. You've got to set your boundaries. You got to figure out your boundaries, all of that sort of thing. And then we're going to talk about how do you make them obsolete. So I'm really curious to dig in. But for the folks who don't know you, Stephanie, give us a little bit of background on what you do, how you have come through, because your wisdom is hard won, right? Hard. You've had some boundary issues in the past. Give us a little bit of snapshot of what that is, and tell us about what you're doing.
Sure. I used to be really good or really bad, I guess, depending on how you look at it, at unhealthy relationships. I used to choose them over and over again. And my first husband actually strangled me on our wedding night, and I stayed for 5 years.
Wow.
And all of those, I mean, at one point he told me I was codependent. I remember looking at him and saying, who are you? You know, you're abusive, you're, verbally and physically abusive. You're just nasty to be around. How dare you? And the reality is that he was right. I was. And that was the reason why I was sticking around, because I was doing more work trying to help him than I was on trying to make my own happiness.
Right.
And I remember going to therapy, starting therapy. And I remember the therapist saying to me, you've got to set boundaries. And I said, what are those? I don't understand. And so I was 34 years old, the first time ever really someone brought up the word boundaries with me. And I was really honestly confused. Like, you can tell someone what you want and then expect a change in behavior. It was like mind blowing to me, because I'd never experienced that my entire life. If I said something, it was like thrown out the window and didn't really matter. And I didn't enforce it. So learning about what boundaries were and practicing them with family members and some friends was really important. And it was really uncomfortable.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a little bit, I was like, I'm going to lose all my friends. I'm not going to have any family. No one's going to, talk to me anymore. And there were some times where I did not speak to family members for a period of time. That did happen. But then the relationship changed. There was more respect when we did come back together. And for all of those reasons, like when I was single, and I was really happily single. And so when I was meeting people and they were interested in having a relationship with me, I started to really get that sense inside of me and what felt right and what felt wrong. And the people that just weren't going to be respectful of me, I stayed away from those people. People that I knew that were going to bring out the worst in me, I was able to stay away from those people. And because I had gotten to know who I was at such a deep level, I was able to meet a really great guy who, by the way, I always like joke around because he was so great and I was having so much fun. I was like, I don't know, this might not be the right combination here. Maybe I should break up with him. So I actually tried to break up with him in my head like 3 times because I was like, it's too good to be true. And a lot of people who've been in unhealthy relationships, there is that feeling of it's too good to be true.
Yes.
And so I allowed him to show me who he was. He was very, not only respectful of my boundaries, but also just brought out the best in me and made it so that I didn't have to keep telling him what I needed and didn't need. It just, we worked well together and we made each other better and feel, just more inspired to do better things with our lives.
Wow. I have to tell you, I always say, and my husband always says, I put him through the ringer when we came together because he had to jump through so many hoops. For me to make sure he wasn't a sociopath, a narcissist, or psycho of any sort. So I was like, I had created like double, triple boundaries
Yeah.
at first.
But the good thing is that, like, for us, we became really good friends. And so there was no forcing, there was no manipulating.
Yeah.
It was, this is who I am. I want you to be in my life. If that's not what you want, I respect that. But I really hope that you do want me in your life. And because of that friendship and that non-forcing, he allowed himself to shine because it was something that I'd never experienced before.
Right. David, what is your perspective on that?
Well, you know what I realized ultimately that after a long period of time, my life wasn't working, and I decided to take the approach of simply trying to work on myself to become the type of person that my ideal partner would find irresistible. I decided to stop trying to control outside circumstances,
Mm,
manipulate relationships so that I would get some sort of anticipated outcome, and really just focus on doing the work myself to be the kind of person that I would buy a drink for. You know what I mean?
wow. Mm,
And be my own best friend. And the qualities of that type of relationship are like Steph spoke about: an ease, a comfort, a willingness and ability to show up authentically, to not have ulterior motives or agendas. And it was probably primarily through that process that allowed me to begin to attract different things in my life, different people. And that's really just I think probably at the core of my success in that regard.
I love that. Now, both of you have said something similar, that you were happy with yourself, or you built yourself to be somebody that you liked. You were your own best friend. I think that's a missing step a lot of times, that people like jump right into another relationship and it seems amazing, it seems perfect, but yet you haven't healed and you haven't become happily single or happily who you are, or even discovered who you are, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people miss or skip over. They just try to fast track that.
I think people mistakenly feel that the source of their happiness, fulfillment, and self-esteem is outside of themselves.
Mm, yeah.
And one of the things that I talk about a lot is emotional self-reliance. And it kind of removes you from the equation of this emotional economy, this neediness that a lot of people bring into relationships.
Right.
And when you are your own best friend and you discover that all of your needs, your core needs, once you've examined those, can be met by yourself, you don't
Mm,
enter into relationships looking for what you can get out of them. You're self-sufficient, and you're more apt to go into a relationship with a generous spirit and a kindness and an interest in supporting the other person rather than getting them to conform to your needs.
Mm-hmm.
right.
And it just creates a different feeling in a relationship, a different dynamic from the beginning.
Wow. We
Yeah.
could do a whole session just on that right
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how do you make boundaries obsolete? So creating boundaries obsolete. So we have to have boundaries, right? Tell me about
Mm-hmm.
that first.
Yeah, well, and so part of me and my healing was learning who I was and then learning what was okay for me, because I had spread myself so thin. I was taking care of everybody. In my family of origin, my mom had some mental health issues. My dad was the codependent one. And so I was the caretaker. I was the oldest sibling and I was taking care of everybody else. And whatever my needs were always put to the side.
Mm,
And I was the go between my parents and my siblings. And then I was just always trying to be aware and taking care of everybody else. And I would just take care of myself last. And I
right.
and I had some good hobbies, and I would exercise and things like that, so I had some good coping mechanisms. But I didn't learn and didn't understand that I could ask for things and have expectations for people, and that I didn't deserve to be walked all over and treated badly and put in the middle of things all the time, and then I could actually say no. It's actually interesting. My sister was pregnant, and this was when I just learned about boundaries, and my therapist is like, all right, you've got to start practicing your boundaries. And I was like, oh, this feels so awkward. And my sister was like 8.5 months pregnant, and she says, hey, Stephanie, you are the person I trust more than anything in the world. When I go into labor, I'm going to need you to come to my house and hang out with my daughter while my son is born. Now, that would be cool if we lived next door. I lived in New York. She lived in North Carolina.
Mm,
And my automatic response was, sure, I'll just start driving as soon as you go into labor and I'll be there. Right away, that was my automatic response. And I started to have this uncomfortable feeling in my chest that I had not really ever put a finger on before. And
right.
so I went to my therapist and I said, this is what my sister asked, and I'm feeling a little bit strange about it, and I don't know why. Let's talk about it. And she said, well, because that's a little bit ridiculous to
Right.
like even ask you to do that, to put you in that kind of position. And I said, so I don't really know what to do. She's depending on me. I don't know who else she has. And my therapist is like, well, she has all these other people that she can ask. She doesn't need to ask you, like have her find someone. She's an adult, have her figure it out.
Right.
And I was like, I felt so strange to have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I can actually have a boundary here. So it was really uncomfortable, but I got up the courage and I told her exactly that. I said, I'm really sorry. I thought about it. I know I said yes, because that was something too. If I said it, I was going to do it.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm really sorry that I said yes to this, but I just don't see how it's going to be possible because I could be at work or there could be something else going on and I just might not make it there in time. And I want you to have somebody else. And my sister says, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll find somebody else. And I was like, what? That was that easy? Like that's all I had to do was to just say that. And that was the beginning of me practicing what boundaries were. And so, I think that it's important for people to realize boundaries aren't necessarily, it's just being assertive and saying what your needs are. I am much more assertive than I've ever been before. I will say it. And there's times too where it might feel uncomfortable to say it, but I also know that if I don't say it right then and there, then it's going to be a problem later on. So I need to speak up for myself as the feelings arise and just let them know, hey, this is what I need from you, or hey, this is what's going on. It's just a normal conversation as opposed to, I need to set a boundary that you need to follow. And that, to me, that almost, it's like, it's gotten to the point of like, this relationship has gotten so far out of control that we need to bring it back in. It's almost easier to, before that even happens, let's just be really open and honest with each other. And when you know who you are and what your needs are, and you're not worried about, your self-esteem is in a good place and you're feeling healthy and you know who you are, it's much easier to stand up for yourself and say what it is that's on your mind.
Yeah. And just another part of this is it's healthy for that other person to have those boundaries so that they know not to. And then you said something about being assertive. I will tell you, when I was a young adult, and I even had like assertiveness training, and I used to have this record playing, I'm not assertive. I can't be assertive. I can't, I'm not, that's not me. It's too difficult. It's too hard. Other people won't like me. I wanted to be liked. How do you get over that?
Practice.
I
mean, I think that's really the best thing, is because I think also too, as a female, we are much more taught to be passive, that the assertive woman is, so maybe not nice names. And, so we've been trained, and it's subconscious. We don't even realize that it's there, like to be demure and quiet and accepting and understanding and all those things. Those are more of those feminine perspective, but it's not aggressive. Being assertive is not aggressive. We're not being nasty or hurtful towards the other person. Being assertive is really just sticking up for yourself. And realistically, nobody else is going to do that for you. The more passive you are, the less people are going to, they're going to walk all over you is really what's going to happen. They're not going to respect you at all. And, I always say that someone who's very passive to me is dishonest, because then I can never trust them.
Right. Yeah.
Is this the part that you're being honest with me with, or is this the part that you're just yesing me to death and then you're going to be angry at me later? That makes me feel uncomfortable. So to be able to have that assertiveness, and again, I was more passive. So I understand where that comes from. It's the need to people please. It's that uncomfortable feeling of they're not going to like me, all of those things. But really it's little practice, everyday practice with different people that, what's on your mind, what you actually want to say, instead of, shoving it down and not saying anything. As you get to know yourself, you get to know your needs, and just start verbalizing what those things are, that practice becomes more natural for you as you keep going.
So give us a couple of examples of not necessarily a safe practicing, but a small practice that people might be able to do weekly or something.
Well, even something like going to a restaurant and having something made the way you like it, that's something. I'm mostly plant-based. And so like going to a restaurant and saying, hey, do you have plant-based options? That's a little bit of sticking up for yourself that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Or, right now, right this second, we're still dealing with the issues with COVID. A really good way to practice that is, if you are socially distancing and wearing a mask and the other people around you aren't, if someone comes too close to you, hey, we're socially distancing, I need you to stay further away from us.
Right.
And it's really uncomfortable for the person who's not used to speaking up for themselves. You need to use your voice to keep yourself safe. Because, you know, if that's something that's important to you, you need to be able to stick up for yourself, because that other person doesn't. They don't think it's important. It's not a big deal. And that's their thing. But if you're trying to be safe and follow the guidelines, then you need to actually say something.
Right. Yeah. And it's scary, but guess what? You are going to become a much stronger person after practicing this and developing this. And not only that, more resilient, and then more joyful, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have that confidence in yourself and you know, hey, it's okay. And you're also kind of, you know, to speak about this, you have to distance yourself from someone else's response,
Mm-hmm.
because they might get angry or they might be uncomfortable themselves that you are setting this boundary, or something like that. And it's okay, because you're not in charge of the feelings of someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not a bad person if they are uncomfortable.
It's not your responsibility to take care of somebody else's emotional reaction to you setting a boundary for yourself.
Yes. Say that again. It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it is. It's not your responsibility. For their reaction to you setting a boundary for yourself is up to them. They don't have to be upset. They don't have to be angry. They don't have to be anything.
Yeah.
They get to choose whatever it is that whatever it is they're doing is theirs. That's up to them. You know, if someone sets a boundary with me, sorry, we have a 4-year-old who now all of a sudden decided to come, you know, play right in front of us. But I mean, we have to decide for ourselves, like, I'm setting a boundary because this is what I need. And if they don't like it, that's also something that we need to know as well. Like, hey, this person isn't even being respectful of something that is important to me. Mm-hmm. That says something about them as well as your friend or relationship, you know, whatever the relationship is.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Mm-hmm. So you talked about them being obsolete. What is that all about?
Go for it. This is yours, David.
Well, you know, a lot of times we get caught up in semantics and the word boundaries is thrown around a lot. I think there's some common connotations. And, you know, we talked a little bit about the male-female perspective. But the way I look at it, the way I perceive boundaries, again, it's just a word, but it's very often perceived to mean or reflect limitations, walls that we sort of put up. You know, when people talk about boundaries, it often implies this separating ourselves from other people. Now, at the core, the important piece is getting clear on what you want and getting better at asserting and communicating your needs, right? To protect your emotions, protect your energy in that sense. But a lot of people, initially at least, look at boundaries as a way to create walls, sort of to protect themselves. And I think especially with men, particularly those of us raised in Western society, we see that as well. And we may not be conscious of it, but essentially the way I look at it is that boundaries are essentially just rules that we create for ourselves. Now, for men in Western society, often we create boundaries that prevent us, for example, from feeling our feelings. We're taught that feelings make us weak and vulnerable. We need to be masculine. We need to be assertive. We need to not be vulnerable. You know, we need to not be in touch with those. So we create boundaries that very often prevent us from feeling our own feelings. And in terms of making them obsolete, I think it's the distinction that the approach of boundaries that create division, create separation, create limitations. That's the part of it that needs to become obsolete, because I think, you know, we talk a lot about external boundaries, but I've spoken before about internal boundaries. And that comes down to the mindset.
Right.
Now, it's important, like we said, to be able to assert yourself and communicate effectively. But I think it starts with getting some clarity on your inner ecology, right? Getting clear on what it is that you really want. And when we talk about boundaries and communicating and asserting what my needs are, I think a preliminary step that's very important is taking a look at yourself, getting sort of an intellectual and emotional inventory and deciding for yourself, because very often we don't consciously look at these things, but deciding for yourself what really is important to you, what matters. In other words, what are your needs? What are your non-negotiable needs? And what are preferences, right? And as you develop what I refer to as that emotional self-reliance, you may find, as I did, that you're less needy. You don't need things to be a particular certain way. You don't need other people to behave a certain way in order for you to feel at peace, in order for you to feel valid. So in terms of making boundaries obsolete, I think it's a matter of taking stock of yourself, deciding for yourself, like, okay, this doesn't serve me. Like, I'm uptight. I feel like I need people to behave a certain way. Otherwise, I feel out of control, whatever the case may be. Go through various practices, take on, practices like meditation, immerse yourself in different communities, different circles of friends, begin to read different books, spiritual, self-help, those sort of things, and develop that emotional self-reliance, that resilience, that place where your peace of mind, your happiness, your fulfillment, your sense of purpose does not depend on anything outside of yourself. Then boundaries aren't these things that we build made out of brick mortar and barbed wire to keep people at a distance, but they're actually just a way of redefining ourselves and stating clearly for ourselves, for others, and for the universe as a whole, that this is what we are, this is what we intend to create, and we have a solid foundation. So it's not about compartmentalizing, it's not about keeping people at a distance, but I think actually healthy boundaries, if we want to define it a little bit differently, can help bring us more close together. So again, the piece that I think can be obsolete is just the idea that boundaries are intended to keep other people at a distance.
Right.
And again, the most important piece about this to me is those internal boundaries, the rules we create for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we do things, think and act and do things based on our perception of some sort of reward. Consciously or unconsciously, we do things because of how we expect those things are going to make us feel. When we examine and begin to shift our rules for ourselves about what is necessary in order for us to get that emotional reward, we're really leveling ourselves up. We're kind of tuning ourselves up. We're eliminating the static, the old behaviors and beliefs that no longer serve our greater vision for ourselves, and it sets us free. And while it can protect us, and again, we talk about boundaries being protective in some sense, that will, in a way, sort of immunize us, inoculate ourselves against the slings and arrows and the so-called good opinions of other people. But at the same time, because we have that greater sense of emotional resilience, that self-reliance, we are able to more fully show up authentically. We're more able to allow other people to be who they are without fear that their perceptions or judgments are going to sway us. We're able to show up with more confidence and willingness to be vulnerable, because that vulnerability isn't, shrouded in fear. It's just a self-awareness, and it's coupled with that, like I said, that self-reliance, an understanding that we don't have to be afraid. And these boundaries, as we might want to call them, actually can lead to deeper and richer and more fulfilling connections with other people. So I think what we need to make obsolete is the concept that boundaries are just about putting up walls, keeping people at a safe distance, that sort of thing. So I talk, again, a lot about those internal boundaries, the rules that we make for ourselves. And it really is, for me, a paradigm shift, because I used to be introverted. I used to be fearful of people. I used to be distrustful and suspicious. And mostly it was because I didn't trust myself. I didn't have a clear picture of who I was, what I really wanted, and whether or not I was capable of achieving those things on my own. And once I began to develop that and become more of a whole person within myself, that led to success in every other area, particularly relationships. And when I showed up to meet Stephanie by that point, I'd done a lot of this work. I was just radiating a different energy. I had a different sense of self. And there was no, because again, we can talk about what we want verbally and understand that, but there's far more, as you know, far more means of communication than just verbal. So the body language and just the energy, and we speak a lot about energy, but there is something there. And when you have a mindset of like neediness or anticipating, looking for opportunities to manipulate or control other people, people sense that, they pick up on it. But when you show up whole and complete, the other person isn't on their heels. They can kind of lean in more, they can be more authentic, more self-expressive, and that just nourishes the ground for, again, a much, much different experience, particularly when it comes to relationships.
Wow, I've got like a gazillion questions going through my mind. So I have a picture in my mind, and I've had this picture of here's you, here's a white picket fence that's a boundary,
Mhm.
and nobody can come in. And so, in order to make that obsolete, you have to expand yourself to there so that like you are a much more whole person. And so that's kind of my like now that my vision is changing on that, and having a healthy boundary means being who you are supposed to be and who you want to be, and you choosing who you let in and all of that sort of thing and what you're doing. And I think maybe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the first step is stopping to figure out who you want to be and who you really are. And I know one of the things that I did when I was first recovering was figuring out my life theme, which I didn't like it was like not raising my hand, not saying no, not standing up for myself. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, I don't like that. you know
Mhm.
and it's okay. I did the best I could at the time I did with what
Mhm.
I had.
Mhm.
So don't just give yourself grace, but then stop and say, okay, who do I want to be, right? Is that and what type of relationships do I want to have, or how do I want to perceive myself? Is that the first step? Tell me a little bit about that. How would
Yeah, I
you
would agree.
develop
And a big
this?
factor in this is working to reduce or eliminate self doubt. A
Mhm.
big
Mm,
piece of redefining yourself is considering what you believe at a deep level is actually possible for you.
right.
And just to take that a step further, to use an analogy, when I talk about boundaries and making them obsolete, it's like you can, maybe you have like, we can think about it, in today's parlance, like a virus, right? You can put up a wall to keep sick people out of your property, or you can work on building up your immune system so you don't have to worry about maintaining this wall around your property. You can still do that. There's value in that to a degree.
Mhm.
You don't want to just seek to hang out with people who are at a lower vibration, right? You want to maintain your environment,
Mm-hmm.
but rather than just putting up walls and neglecting your own personal development, you take those
Right.
steps to, like I said, sort of inoculate yourself against it. And maybe it's not the best analogy, but the idea
No, I like
is
that. Yeah.
that you're more self-sufficient. So it's
Mm.
not about walling yourself off. It's about.
I think that we a lot of the times are living somebody else's life. We have these expectations in our own minds of what somebody else wants us to be. And then so many of us fall into that. And again, there's like the female roles, there's the male roles, there's your parents' ideas, there's your siblings, there's your friends, there's all these other people. So a lot of us are trying to, be our best to make these other people happy all over the place. And next thing you know, you turn around and you're like, but I don't even know who I am.
Right.
What is it that I like? What is it that I don't like? Why am I just making it everybody else happy, but I'm not making myself happy? I think that that's a
Yeah.
big piece.
Yeah.
And it changes your relationship dynamics, because when you learn these things and begin to become more self-sufficient and define and establish boundaries, the people who have been used to you being a pushover are not going to react too kindly to that. But
Mm-hmm.
what I've
Mm-hmm.
also found is that when you become healthy and increase your emotional intelligence, the right people are actually going to respect and appreciate your assertiveness,
Right.
and the fact that you have those boundaries, and they're going to support you. So yeah, the type of person that you attract in your life and wind up spending your time with, that's going to change dramatically too. And again, it just contributes to a better quality of life overall, I think.
Oh, yeah. And so let's paint a vision. What does it look like when you have healthy boundaries, or you've gained that confidence in yourself, and you come together with another person of equal, this the same type of level of self-understanding, who have gotten there. What does that relationship look like?
Freedom.
Yeah, that's the number one word to come up with. Yeah.
Freedom.
Wow.
And we have a lot of times those expectations that being in a committed relationship means less freedom.
Mm-hmm. That's what I used to think it was.
you know,
I thought
and it's,
relationships were like about like keeping you suppressed, and
yeah,
that's literally
limiting
not
your
at all what it
options and
is.
stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it is a fundamental shift in your attitude and your perceptions. But yeah, it feels free. I mean, and sometimes that perception of a monogamous relationship, for example, being limiting, is one of those secondary gains, as we call them in the community, the things that actually prevent you from changing. For example, if you want to be in a committed, serious, connected, deep, monogamous relationship, but you value your freedom more and you perceive that a committed relationship would limit that, you're going to be self-sabotaging.
Right.
But if you
Which is
address,
why I almost broke up with him a few times,
well,
because
that's
that was my fear.
right. And again, I gave her freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I adopted that idea of, you must be willing to let go of everything you fear to lose. And even as my heart was telling me, like, I think this is the one, it's like, I have to be totally willing to just let her go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, once you make the shift, and realize that, the other person, doesn't have, being with someone on that level doesn't have to limit you. You can actually make a shift at a subconscious level to include the idea that being in a monogamous committed relationship is actually more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one of the primary reasons is that we show up authentically for one another and we support each other without question. So it's, again, there's never that sense of like, oh, I've got to answer to this person. They're not going to agree with what I think. They're going to cut me down. They're going to, complain and try to distract me from my vision, that sort of thing. There's never anything like that. So yeah, being in a monogamous relationship, this committed relationship, this true partnership that we have, just feels more free
And inspiring. I'm not sure I would have gotten to this level had I not found David, and I was doing a lot of really great stuff without David. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's was
synergy.
Yeah, it's the synergistic effect. So it just starts building more and more, and just, better and better things coming. And, I think a lot of people get confused when it comes to a relationship, a romantic relationship. I mean, he's my best friend. Being stuck, COVID stuck, quarantining with someone, I would pick him any day. Like, that's totally fine with me. I don't mind, and so, and it's fun. We have a good time. We make sure that even though we have kids and they can be distracting, we still find time to hang out with each other at night. We have that little time to spend with each other. And he's still the person that I would rather spend my time with. Yeah. And so, and I feel charged up as opposed to depleted, where in the past, it was just constantly, my energy was drained. And when you stop putting all of your energy into dealing with someone else and trying to walk on eggshells and trying to figure out what's wrong with them and all of manipulating and sometimes controlling, there was times with my ex-husband, I would try to control his behavior, which was impossible. That was never going to happen. But I was using up all my energy trying to control what he was doing. Now all of that goes away. Now I can put all that energy into bettering myself, having real, open, genuine conversations where I feel safe and I feel loved and I can be vulnerable and it's not thrown back in my face. I mean, that is something that a lot of people don't get to experience because they haven't evolved to that place where they feel comfortable in who they are and then attract this type of healthy partner.
Yeah. And I will tell you, let's give people hope. Like, you, David, and my husband, Sam, are not unicorns. There are lots of people out there.
Yes.
That are both women and men who are really genuinely amazing people and will not try to bring you down, cut you down, will have your back. They want the best for you. And the best way to find those people is to become the best person that you can possibly be.
Yeah. That's it. And it's a big disconnect for a lot of people because, again, people feel like they have to achieve their end goal by going out there, by striving, by being ambitious, by putting on airs and posturing and trying to form this ego and project this perception of other people. But what I found, especially for myself, the key to success was, becoming the type of person, like I said, that my ideal partner would find irresistible.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in the statement that you don't get what you want, you get what you are. And the idea is that you need to, whatever it is that you want, you need to be able to give away, because if you are acting as a part of the universe, I don't think the universe, the source of all creation, doubts itself. So in other words, if you have a mindset of lack, the universe is going to say, yeah, here you go. Here's more lack. You know what I mean? But, and it's difficult because it's like, people don't want to believe it until they see it. But this is the quantum approach, where you have the belief first, and then, and you actually get into the mode of thinking and feeling, most importantly, feeling what it would feel like to have all this abundance in your life, and express gratitude, right? Because when you express gratitude, that's a sign to the universe that, like, okay, there isn't that sense of lack, there isn't wanting. And then the universe brings into, more abundance. So that the idea is, give away that which you seek, and again, that ties into being self-reliant, so you don't need other people. But the magical part about it is that when you become that type of person, then you naturally attract the right kind of person. So in terms of hope, absolutely, 100%, it's out there. We didn't think, we are, I don't say advanced age, but like,
well, we got married. He was 39, I was 37. I had my first child at 38.
Right.
So
and
anyone
by
who
most standards, that's like, oh, that's old. And we'd been at a point prior to meeting one another where we're like, we got to be okay with the possibility of just not meeting that perfect person, possibly not having kids. But the reality is, all it took was a shift internally on our parts. And again, there's 7-8 billion people on the planet. You have to expect that there's at least one, if not dozens, hundreds, or maybe even thousands of people who are out there with the mindset of, you know what, there's someone out there who's maybe dealing with a lot of crap right now, but I'm anticipating and looking forward to them dealing with their stuff, growing as a result, and becoming a whole person that shows up authentically. So yeah, for anyone who's not sure if like this type of fairy tale is possible, it absolutely is. And the key is, which is great, it's very empowering from the way I look at it, it's not about being more clever or developing yourself to become something more than you are. It's just about doing the work to eliminate the things that aren't reflective of your truest vision. Because the type of person you want in your life, certainly for me and for a lot of people, is someone who sees you for who you are and respects that, and doesn't need you to be anything other than who you truly are, is able to accept and appreciate the aspects of what you bring to the table that complement them, but they're also willing to accept the things that maybe aren't quote unquote perfect. Because at that point, it's not about what I need and how things look and that sort of thing. It's more about like, let's just, we're two people showing up to see what we can offer, what we can give to one another and our family, our community, and the world at large. So when you do the work on yourself, when you focus on that, that is the key to getting what you want. Become the type of person that you would, buy lunch and a drink for. Become the type of person that you would love to hang out with. And number one, it relieves the stress of feeling like, you can't be at ease and at peace because you're always seeking something else. Like, I love my alone time. I tend to be introverted by nature. You might not be able to tell from my chattiness now, but like realistically, I love myself enough, and it's not an arrogant love. It's not prideful. It's just a sense of peacefulness. It's a sense that I can come home to that. And any relationship I enter into, there doesn't typically wind up being any of that sense of like, oh, I feel ill at ease. What's this person really after? That sort of thing. It sets you free. And again, the magical piece is you begin to attract people and circumstances in your life that reflect that level of emotional intelligence. And it totally supports it.
And just for anyone who's watching this too, we've talked about this before. If we would have met 10 years before, we wouldn't have been right for each other. Ready.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So be patient with yourself. Take the time,
And then it might be that like once you build yourself up and you are an amazing best friend to yourself, that's beautiful going into old age. Like for me, I was ready to go into old age just by myself because I had created the life of my dream. Like I loved my life. I was happy with who I was. I was, it was like amazing. Like I'm making my own choices. I'm doing all kinds of things and love who I was, and actually got back to who I was before. Actually, I'm better now than even before that relationship. And so when you have that, you can be have an exciting life, an amazing life, a resilient life, a joyful life, even if you do not find somebody else that's so in either case,
Agreed.
you have won, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, I love it. We could talk about this forever, but tell us, like, if you were to boil down one word of advice from somebody who is, struggling with this, what would you give them? I want one from each of you.
Well, I mean, maybe not one word, but well,
No,
I'd say
one gift
one
of
topic,
One
advice.
concept.
but freedom. I think that the big thing is you're way stronger than you realize.
Yeah.
You really have the power to create the life that you want if you get out of your own way, get the right help, and make a conscious decision to say, I will do everything in my power to never do this again.
Right.
And then when you make that commitment to yourself, and even life's going to happen, there's going to be all these things that get in the way of you doing all those things. We can allow them to happen and not change. Or we can allow life to happen and say, you know what, still, I'm going to put myself first, and I'm going to make it a priority to do the work that I need to so that I can grow. And like you said, be not even back to where you were, but the best version of you ever.
Right.
Because before all of this stuff, we were still trying to figure it out. And some of us didn't have any time to do that at all. Now's that opportunity to figure out who that is. And you get to create something completely different than what you ever would have expected before. My thought of what life was going to be when I was a teenager and where it is now are very different, but it's very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. All right, David?
Yeah, I don't think I can really add too much to that. She pretty much took the words out of my mouth. But yeah, a big part of this is self-awareness, and you have to be willing to commit beyond just a casual interest. You need to be willing to commit to getting the guidance, the support, and the tools to engage in a process of deep self-discovery. Right? So a willingness to take a look at yourself, to start to think about what you think about on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Consider the degree to which you've been sleepwalking and just kind of going through the motions, right? Because that's just, your life is just a repetition of old programs. There's nothing new. So when you start to really take a look at where you're at, when you start to really get honest and ask yourself the tough questions, begin to project out into the future and honestly begin to understand what your future is going to look like. If you do not change, you got to get leverage on yourself. People don't tend to change until they feel like they must change.
Right.
All right. Casual interest or, oh yeah, wouldn't that be nice? It's not enough. Right. It's not enough. And the other thing is, and I'm guilty of this, having had a mindset where, oh, if and when, like once this happens or that happens, then I'll be a little bit, when the stars align, then I can make that transformation.
Right.
Time doesn't exist in that sense. And at our core, where change happens, our subconscious, there is no perception of past or future. It's always the now. That's why something that happened ages ago can trigger us just by thinking about it, even though the pain is past. Like we feel it physiologically as though the trauma was happening.
Yeah.
So the key is to get clear on where you're at, really start asking the tough questions and acknowledge, because I don't think it's a foreign concept to most of us, but acknowledge the degree to which you are lying to yourself. Okay. And I'm not talking about engaging in this process with any judgment, comparison, but just honesty. And then, like we talked about before, hope, and understand that you are far more powerful than you've been led to believe. The key is, what are you thinking about on a daily basis? What are you focusing on? And a big piece in shifting that is getting in a different environment, getting a different group of friends, getting mentors who are actually where you want to be. Stop taking advice from people who aren't where you want to be. Stop looking for people to commiserate with and people who are just going to justify your feeling of lack. Get with people who are going to lovingly but firmly kind of hold your feet to the fire and say, no, you are worth more. You deserve more. You're capable of far more. And let's just take baby steps. Let's make those slight changes that get that slight edge. Do the things that are easy to do, but also easy not to do, right? And begin to make shifts on a daily basis. But yeah, short story long, that's kind of like my
That's your
little
2 cents.
layering on.
That's perfect. I love it. All right. Well, if people want to explore about you guys further, where can they find you at?
Well, our main group is on Facebook. It's called Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt. If you do a
Yes.
search, it's a private group. We screen the members, but it's really designed to create a community. It's one of the most engaged and active, vibrant communities online when it comes to helping people, break the cycle of negativity in their past, end
Yeah.
self-sabotage, get to really truly learn about and love themselves,
Yeah.
and then begin to attract that magnificent kind of relationships in your life. So you can look for us on Facebook at Being Love Shouldn't Hurt.
The full name is Being Love Shouldn't Hurt, Codependency,
Codependency, healing,
Healing,
and
and
healthy
Healthy
relationships.
Relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll put
Yes,
the
sir.
link down below too. So
Perfect,
we'll have
perfect.
that.
Yeah, you're all welcome to join. It's a free community. We offer a ton of great
We
content.
do weekly lives every
Weekly
Thursday at
live
9:30
Yes,
p.m.
you guys are amazing with that. Very consistent. I love it. Amazing. Well, thank you both, Stephanie and David. I really appreciate you sharing your insights. This is a fabulous topic and one much needed. So I appreciate you all.
So glad to be on. I
Yeah.
appreciate you as well, Stacey.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.